said. That was a really good report back. Thank you very much, group number 3. We'll go ahead and jump to group number 5. Group number 5, facilitators, come on up. Or whoever's going to report back within your group, come on up. Anybody within the group, feel free to come on up. And when you do, please introduce yourselves by telling us your name and where you're from, and whatever else that you might want to share. And again, we're looking for details and specifics within how it went within your group. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Kathy Scarrett from Cleveland, Ohio, and by an accident of birth, I'm a settler. But by heart, feeling, intention, I am your ally. And I'm really have enjoyed this process tremendously, and we'll share just the first few points that we came up with in our group, and then others will share additional points. Can you come around this way just a little bit? Thanks. So we had all the questions up on the board, and then had more of a kind of open-ended discussion rather than going through each question individually. And we started with someone commenting that just to bring up the issue of the rights of Mother Earth in some communities is the first and largest challenge, that how to introduce the subject at a very basic level is a bit of a perplexing thing to think about and to figure out how to do. And in what context that conversation needs to happen, that context determines, of course, what specific actions or ideas might come forward. We talked about expanding the conversation to youth, how to do that, and doing this in large part through universities in order to bring the idea of the rights of Mother Earth to the mainstream. And one of the specifics that was mentioned was, for instance, working through environmental studies programs at universities, asking them to have events and to discuss perhaps a preset set of topics, 1 to 3 questions, and that those questions could be discussed simultaneously across environmental studies programs at multiple universities, so that there's a synergy and an energy that gets created around a field, if you will, of consideration about these issues. We talked about the importance of telling stories and having nested levels of communication. For instance, having a broad message that is spoken across the nations about what this means, the rights of Mother Earth. And then on a local level, we talked about how that broader message would be translated, if you will, down to the local circumstance. Okay, next page, please. Thanks. It's okay. There was some conversation about there being a real barrier to the language of Mother Earth in terms of taking it to mainstream media, and that the idea that policy of major news outlets or news media trumps the story most of the time, and so how do we work with that or even bypass that? And then that led to talking about using the media to strengthen, or using media like Facebook to strengthen the memory and respect of all people for Mother Earth, and doing this in local communities first, and allowing that energy to then well up through ever larger systems. Okay, I think Roberto will speak next.
My name is Roberto Natch-Lewis. I came with the most awesome delegation, the Navajo delegation, Black Mesa Water Coalition, AZ. So this whole thing about how do we introduce this concept to within our communities, we kind of had a discussion on this, and especially for indigenous people adapting to, I guess for me it was like looking at climate change as a way to introduce this concept, because currently the type of development that we've experienced is really pushing ecology to its limit and on the brink of collapse. And climate change is one of those phenomenon that's telling us that we are pushing it to the brink of collapse. And for us, that's what we're doing, is really introducing this again, reconnecting to our traditional teaching that tells us that there are limits within the ecology and ecosystems that we live in. And based on those limits, derives our cultural teachings and understanding of how we should act and how we should make a way of life on this land. So through climate change, there's an opportunity for us, this generation, to relook at what are the limits and what are the changes happening. And this is not something new for indigenous people. We have it in our own stories, traditional stories that we have that based on the things that have occurred through our creation stories, that we were forced to go into different worlds because we pushed our ecology to its limits. So we have these experiences as indigenous people of adapting, and that's what's happening today. Looking at mitigation and adaptation, I think that's a way for us to introduce that understanding that there are limits and begin to bring in people into this conversation. The communities we organize in, which primarily is on the reservation, already understand this because a lot of our tribal members still live somewhat a subsistent way of life depending on the land. And they are experiencing, and they do know that changes are happening. We just got to go and continue to bring that understanding larger into the community. Again, part of the strategies we're doing is working with the university, developing curriculum with the schools to implement, and so that's the strategy for our own community. How do we take it to our own community? But there's also an important aspect of how do we take it to mainstream America? And for us is taking a stand to say, like, no more. We're not going to subsidize and let you guys use our resources, whether it's energy or water. We're going to unplug you guys and turn off the water from you guys because that's our resources. And if we decide to keep it in the land, we're going to keep it in the land. So I think that's a wake-up call for mainstream America when it hits them. And we can't use the current economic paradigm to argue these points. We have to always come back to our traditional framework and come from that background or from that grounding. And looking at what has worked, I guess, what strategies do we need to adapt? And we have to take that back to our communities and have them participate in this process of what type of development do we need and how do we adapt to these changes.
Greetings, my name is Donna Ashmuck. My community is Mo Quebec. We're up in James Bay area in 2 communities, Moose Moose Factory. We have a few more points, so I'll try to run through it. And if I forget anything, just maybe talk with one of our group members. Okay, number 11. One-on-one conversations are key in some communities. Possible methods could be inquiries, help communities build ownership in their own knowledge. Let's see who they are, what worked when things were at their best, way to build allies. Number 12, build intergenerational connections. That one I felt personally was key. We had 2 young men in our group who are from this university, and I pretty much got the sense it was their first time being involved in a setting like this. And I was very curious to hear what they had to say. I would have to say making more time. I think somebody had said that earlier, for that communication, for that knowledge to be shared. As much as elders have experience and knowledge that we need to understand, it's also having young people tell their stories. That's key. Number 13, design economic leverage points, such as boycotting, that lead people, unions, investors withdrawing money. So getting that attention out there, building that campaign, that money hitting people in the pocketbooks does make a big impact. Number 14, conducting assessments on state of a system, food security. What do people want to do, have security in this area? Roberto had talked about his community and looking at maybe 30 years ago when food sovereignty, food security, food sovereignty was very strong. And in this day and age, modern age, that's fallen to the wayside. And he had mentioned McDonald's, communities supporting McDonald's, the big multinationals, as opposed to looking at the traditional foods that are still grown in the area. so encouraging that. I know that there are some connections to the earlier points, so I'm sorry if I missed anything. And just three more. 15, again, looking at rights of Mother Earth, rights of nature. We thought maybe number 8, well, A, B, and C, slow food movements. That could be a way to insert the knowledge, the campaign. Another one is work with universities to shift perception. The idea behind that is academics. As much as they come into our communities and knowledge goes out, we can also use that to our advantage. For instance, the paper writing that they do does affect policy. So again, having a clear strategy on how we can utilize. C, ask people to remember customs, etc., even those who are Christians, etc. Randy had said something earlier, I think it was this morning, looking at who we are as Cree, looking at ourselves from years ago. We got to remember too that as much as we may have a lot of different sects of religions, Pentecostal, we may have Baptists, we may have, you name it, Anglican, Roman Catholic. We also got to remember that we're very strong spiritually. Even having, why did we gravitate towards those religions? Yes, we were beaten into that, assimilated through boarding schools, but we also got to remember that we're very spiritual people, and there are ways to reach our people. And again, looking at customs, who were we before all of this happened? 16, non-Native people are interested in Native American story. Most of general public are in ignorance and are appalled when the truth becomes known to them. Education being key. People are shocked when they realize American history or Canadian history. People don't know about the residential schools, is what we call them in Canada, Indian boarding schools in the States. And again, history in North America, yes, but we also got to reach further and find out, well, what was going on in Europe back then? Yes, there were boarding schools. They had their own strategies that they brought over to North America. So learning history, understanding that is key. 17, tourism on our terms. Come and be educated. Alana, I think, had mentioned that in summarizing our workshop notes. She had mentioned tourism, also calling on Randy's point of ecotourism. The Eco Lodge. I don't mean to promote Cree Village Eco Lodge. It's my community's Eco Lodge. It's not privately owned. So, and it's tough, having to go through every day running an Eco Lodge, the constant education that goes on. But when you look at tourism or ecotourism, it really ties in with our values as Indigenous people, whether we're Cree or Ojibwe. And we encourage people to come. This is also key. We encourage folks to come and learn our history. Maybe not necessarily being immersed, but at least they get that understanding of what went on over the years with our culture, the erosion, but also what's still here, what's still alive. It hasn't been lost. So those are key points. We tried to summarize as much as possible, but again, going through each of the questions was kind of tough. We more or less put our ideas on flip chart as opposed to separating in smaller groups. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that great report back. And we're going to go ahead and jump back to group number 1. This will be our final report back. And then afterwards, we have time up until 6:30 to do some open mic here, but also to remember that we have a listening audience out there and see if we can address some other questions. I did have somebody that wanted me to talk about the idea of being able to connect with the Occupy movement, because it could be a fresh set of minds, or there's actually a lot around that idea of Occupy, and there's been a lot coming around decolonize. And there's actually a site that Boston folks have been working on, and thank you to the Boston folks, by the way, that have been donating to our gathering here. We really appreciate it, and even if that donate button doesn't work, don't give up. We'll get it fixed. And it's Decolonize to Liberate. So if you want to check that out, that would be a great resource to check out and start from. So we'll go on to our group number 1 here. Apparently they're going to do interpretive dance. They're back behind the stage. I don't know what they're doing here. So, a pantomime. Keep it interesting. This is cutting into your time, folks. Come on up, 5 to 7 minutes. Please introduce yourselves, name and where you're from.
We are back there strategizing, deciding who's going to hold it. My name is Simone Senegals. I work at the Indigenous Environmental Network on our food sovereignty program, and I'm just going to give a little overview of what our group did today. We actually I found our group, the dynamics to be challenging today, more so than yesterday. And I think that was a good thing. It was a good challenge. We had a lot of diversity in our group. We had natives, non-natives. We had people who are really strong in their Christian beliefs, people who are strong in their traditional indigenous beliefs. And so it was kind of a good exercise for us to actually talk about this within this diversity of this group. One of the things too that was sort of difficult was that we kind of moved into how we're going to bring this home. And one of the things that we found was when we really think about bringing this home, even for Indigenous communities who are sort of the origin of really the rights of Mother Earth, is that we are really dealing with colonization. And so how do we sort of, we have to start sort of working on undoing some of that colonization before we even start really reconnecting with some of our traditional values that are in accordance with the rights of Mother Earth. And then just 2 more things that I thought was really cool. We had a young woman who said, when we were talking about how are we going to bring this home, and she said, well, I'm going to ask my elders. and I was like, oh yeah. It's like all those simple things. And then we had an auntie who said, I'm going to engage the youth. And I thought that was a really cool and strong statement from our communities. And so I just wanted to really acknowledge that. And now I'm going to turn it over to my co-facilitator.
My name is Denny Gayton. I'm Standing Rock Sioux. As you guys all know in your groups, these are the questions. So our group spent a significant amount of time bringing everybody back up to speed from yesterday and talking about what the rights of Mother Earth is and kind of what it means. There were a number of people that weren't there yesterday, and a lot of people. I think that a lot of the people that were in our group, or at least some of them, it kind of seemed a little bit like intellectual navel gazing, or just kind of letting the wheels spin. Like, what does that even mean? And it's significant in that that it was raised from Ecuador, not from a university, and so you should ask why. And there are quite pragmatic reasons for that, and that's because people that are there. They're trying to stand up for whatever it is. Could be water, it could be animals, could be a number of things. They're trying to stand up for them. And like here, for example, you just can't. You have to have some sort of interest. And today in a courtroom, you need a legal interest. If you don't have that, as someone mentioned earlier today, you got to get out. Case is thrown out. End of the ball game. And so there are very pragmatic reasons, and they should be well understood. And if they're not, that should be understood as one of the bases for this problem. And so, what is that? The question then: what's this going to look like at home? How do you even talk to people about it at home? A lot of the people here are probably educated people, and a lot of times, I guess you could say it's a pattern, educated people have some sort of barrier or difficulty in talking to non-educated people. A lot of times they just don't know how to do it. And that's a different problem for another day. But in just talking about it at home, we have to address, well, what's it going to look like? What type of what's the in, what's the way that you're going to approach, and so on. And a lot of people talked about, one member brought up a particular approach that he had been using here in Kansas, and it was focusing on butterflies, and he used his own backyard as a halfway point, basically, or one of the midway points in the migration of butterflies. There were a number of similar projects, but that was one that had already received funding, it was one that was already established, and it was one that had worked. Nobody had shut him down yet. But there were a number of other similar sentiments that lacked empirical examples, but they expressed the same thing. And so a lot of the people in our group were talking about using whatever it is, whatever the problem is at home. I mean, everybody's land or whatever is going on at home, there's some sort of problem. And one of the ones that we used to illustrate this was the Mandan, Hadassah, and Arikara right now. You have Tex Hall, and he's trying to advocate that there are no regulations for fracking. And those of you who know about that, can talk at length later on. But he's trying to make sure that there's no regulations for fracking. So then, if we were sitting in that group, we asked ourselves, well, what if we're the tribal members of Fort Berthold? What do we do? How do we approach this? We're just people. We're just Indians. We're not on the tribal council and so on. What do we do? And so using whatever the issue is in the home location, using that as a way to spark interest or spark comment. I mean, some people are going to be upset. Some people are going to be related to whoever's in power, and everybody's going to have their handle to be stirring the pot. So there's lightning rods, and those ones that are most visible are going to be easiest to use to stir it. The second part of it is, can you raise that up for 1 second? I'm sorry. What do we need to spark this talk at home? And so that same member who talked about the butterflies, he had this approach, he called it the 5-finger approach. And he was talking about show, tell, do, review, and repeat. And so the approach was not so much as no matter if you're from the community and related to everybody, or if you're not related at all and you're just trying to help some community, some town, to go and basically use whatever's there, and you're just kind of someone facilitating it. You have as little of an official position as possible. And when you're working in tribal communities, nobody likes it when someone comes in with a title for themselves anyway. Usually then you get blackballed and maybe a black eye and sent on your way. But that's a very good example. And one thing that the people that we were all there, most of them were educated people, and I found it very interesting. This is my own side comment. But I found it instructive in that nobody addressed, how do we just talk to people? How do we just talk to them? Everybody was talking about setting up meetings and official type of things, which are not without merit. But what about just talking to people? And so then, are there things at home to integrate this with? We really didn't get to address that, but it's probably, in my opinion, and our other facilitator, we thought that it may have been good or better, or it would have been different in another positive way if we had even started with that question. Because then there was someone who addressed service learning as basically an in, and there was someone, that same person talked about schools. Even if you have children, most of you do, you know that schools are always looking for people to come in and help in some way. That help can take a variety of forms, and they're always willing to get children involved in the environment and being able to apply the methods by which they analyze and observe and subject the earth to analysis. So you can do whatever you want with that, but those are two examples of how to do it. And I think that a lot of the people really had a good a good grip, especially on these first two questions, particularly in how are we going to go about doing it. There was a lot of talk, and I think that the people there just came away with a good understanding that we really need to be able to talk to people, and that we have a lot of ideas on how to do it. We're all in professional or quasi-professional positions, and we all know how to make stuff work. We've all been a part of projects. Usually, people you don't get along with, you can kind of squeeze them out, or you can get around them, circumvent them in some way. But when you're working at home or in some actual community, not a network, you got to find out how to work with people, and that's one thing that we can't forget, especially if you're all related to them. So, with that, our group appreciates you listening to us. Thanks.
Thank you so much.